Hello, hello, everyone. Happy Friday to you. Happy Friday. We're just giving it a minute for everyone to get settled into our Zoom community today for the Intentional Conversations podcast. Welcome. I hope your week has been wonderful. Feel free to take a moment to locate the chat and let us know where you're joining the conversation from. We always like to see where people are participating in our Intentional Conversations podcast. We are also super excited because we've entered into our 5th anniversary month. And so you will find that we're going to be celebrating in all types of ways all year long. So yay 5 for NWC. I am being supported today by a number of colleagues at NWC. And so I really appreciate each of them for helping us to bring this opportunity to this broader community. This is our way of showing up for each of you by helping you to deepen your level of understanding and knowledge around a variety of topics related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Good morning, Wanda from Synex. Happy Friday to you. Thank you for the anniversary greetings. Good morning, Andrea. I always like to take a moment to greet some of our folks who are here with us. Good morning, Vicki. It's good to see you joining us from New York. Charlotte, North Carolina is here as well. Tamala, thank you. And if you also feel inclined, certainly also share your LinkedIn information into the chat. Lauren Black, welcome. Thanks so much for joining from Philly. Really appreciate you being here. But we like to make sure that we have an opportunity to connect with this community beyond the hour that we spend together on Fridays. And so if you are feeling inclined to connect with others from the VodCast community, then please feel free to share your LinkedIn information in the chat as well. Cameras today are not required, but they are encouraged. We love to see smiling faces, but if you also just want to join us in auditory capacity, then we appreciate that as well. Okay, we have a lot to cover this hour, so I want to go ahead and get started so that we can maximize every minute of goodness that I know this hour is going to bring to us. So I want to begin by, as we normally do, just introducing a little bit about Intentional Conversations VodCast, which again is our virtual community opportunity where we intersect conversations of diversity, equity, and inclusion with leadership in business, bringing all types of leaders and practitioners who work in this space, who care about DEI, B, and J, to come and share with us based upon their voice of authority. And so I hope you enjoy this intro. Great. So once again, I am Dr. Nika White. I serve as founder and lead principal consultant for NWC, and we are a full service diversity, equity, and inclusion management consulting firm where we work with all types of clients all over the globe, helping them to intersect into their business frameworks, strategic diversity, intentional inclusion, and a lens of equity. And so you are joining us today as part of our Intentional Conversations VodCast. We do this every Friday, 11 a.m. to 12 noon Eastern Standard Time, and we've been expecting you. We have a great co-host today that I cannot wait to introduce. And so thank you so much for being here. Be sure to use the chat today to create that sense of community. If I say something that resonates with you, or our guest co-host says something that resonates with you, then place your thoughts and sentiments into the chat. Let's make sure that we're sharing resources with each other that will benefit all of us that are connected here today. If there are words that are spoken by members that are participating in today's VodCast, then we hope that you will stand in solidarity, maybe with words of affirmation into the chat. But we love that to serve as a lifeline as we continue to extend this experience throughout this hour. I also am so excited to share that NWC turned 5 on February 1. That is no small feat. We are really excited to celebrate being in existence for 5 years, and we just appreciate you being part of this journey with us. And so thanks so much to so many of you who have reached out because maybe you're part of our email list, or maybe you've seen some of our postings on social media, just to share congratulations on turning 5. We do appreciate it. Now, this podcast would not be possible without our large community of individuals that are willing to help share recommendations, as well as to accept our invite. And so we believe that part of the value of making this available is leaning into our community and asking for those recommendations. So if you know of someone who is a leader or an ally or a practitioner in this space that would add value to our podcast community as a co-host, I would love for you to let us know. You can email my colleague, Courtney Perry. Her email is on the screen, Courtney@nikawhite.com. She's also joined here today, and we would love to hear from you. So thank you in advance for sending those recommendations our way. One of the ways in which we also like to show up for our broad community of supporters is through short video clips that we release every week, and it's called Inclusion Uncomplicated. It's all about simplifying DEI. You can catch all of the replays or even just go to the YouTube channel by simply going to our website, nikawhite.com. And I hope that that information will serve as a launching pad for you to deepen your understanding and knowledge of DEI concepts. And then one of the other things that we like to do each week is let you know what you have to look forward to in terms of some upcoming guests on our Intentional Conversations VodCast. And let me tell you, the lineup is fire. We have guest co-hosts already secured through, I believe, the end of April. But next Friday on February the 11th, we are welcoming John Graham. And in that conversation, we're going to be talking about making decisions through the lens of a healthy Black psychology rather than white psychology. And so he's written a book, and I can't wait to be in dialogue with John. He is an incredible leader in this space, and I want you to have the benefit of getting to know him. And then following that Friday on the 18th, we have another incredible guest co-host, Dr. Theresa White, and she is going to be joining us as we talk about serving diverse families and particularly serving children well and educating them about diversity early. She is the owner of an organization called Student Solutions, and her craft and how in which she shows up for families that have kids in need for early development needs is amazing, and I want you to have the benefit of hearing from her. So join us on February the 18th. And then the following Friday, again, I told y'all it's fire. We have Brittany Janae Harris. And so she's going to be joining us, and she's going to be talking about, as DEI practitioners, how in which that we have influence and how we show up to this work. And so she is also a part of the Winters group. Some of you may remember we had Mary Frances Winters a few podcasts ago. And so I really look forward to being in conversation with Brittany as well later this month. And last but finally not least, I always like to give a formal introduction of today's co-host so that you all can understand the lens, the accolades, the credentials in which our co-host brings to our podcast community. So today will be no different. And then I will invite Maikel to share and greet this audience in his own way. And I want you to, with me, join in helping him to feel very welcome through whatever way that feels appropriate to you, whether it's messages in the chat or some of the Zoom reactions. But let's make sure that we extend a very warm welcome to Maikel. Maikel Groenewoud specializes in data science and artificial intelligence. He performs technical implementations and also has a particular focus on trust and ethics as it relates to the technology. He studied business mathematics and informatics in Amsterdam, nowadays known as business analytics, and began his career at a policy research institute where he worked for over 10 years. He has been working at EY Netherlands since 2016 as a manager within the consulting practice, where he leads the data science and AI capability. Maikel was born and raised in Amsterdam and is of Afro-Surinamese and descent. And Suriname is a country in South America, a former colony of the Netherlands. And Maikel certainly has a lot to tell about the history and how it relates to the present. He has a Pan-African mindset and is very much here to aid in healing the souls of Black folks. And so we have been practicing his name for a long time now. I hope I did you proud, Maikel. I know it's probably not perfect, but I hope I did you proud. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so we can bring you on and spotlight you for this conversation. But we're so glad you're here. Please, just in your own way, welcome this audience and greet this audience. Thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you for the warm welcome. And you certainly did me proud, Dr. Nika. I think if we look at all the things that you do, you are doing me and a lot of people proud. So, I think it's, I'm very pleased to be here. I also want to thank the audience for attending today. And yeah, I'm looking forward to engaging with you. I've been following your conversations for a while. You have a lot of great guests already, and yeah, just chatting with you, I think that's something for me to really look forward to also. So yeah, I would say let's go.
Let's go, Maikel. Let's go. So listen, you have been an incredible supporter. I think that you are kind of one of the routine participants in our podcast. And so it's great to have you as a co-host today. And so you know the drill. You know what I'm going to ask you next. You know, we've heard your bio, but what else will we not know about you from reading your bio that you're willing to share with this community?
Yeah, I think what you might not necessarily see just based on bio, you might think that, okay, I'm someone in the technical field. And that's only partly so because, like, honestly, like my favorite subjects was like history and language, psychology, also interesting for me. So I'm not only looking at the technical side, and I think that's that also really informs like the different lenses I bring to the work I do. I look at it a lot of times from a historical perspective, and I think that really adds flavors and elements to it that otherwise might not be there, and also lead to interesting discussions because I surprise people with the stuff that I say that sometimes informed from a lot of things from history. And so that's something that you might not directly see when you look at me. Other thing that you might not also directly see is that even though I work at EY, which is a big corporate, the way that I got there was actually because they had acquired a company that I actually applied to. And initially, it wasn't that clear that they had been fully incorporated by EY. So that's also how I arrived at this big corporate. So that's maybe also interesting aspect because like some people they grow up within such a big company, and for me, it was not like that. So
Yeah. We talked about that a little bit before the top of the hour started. So thank you so much for being here. So I often like to dig a little bit deeper into people's DEI story. And when I say DEI story, I think that how in which each of us show up to this work, this conversation, diversity, equity, and inclusion, belonging, it definitely is shaped by our own lived experiences and by our intersecting identities. And so I would love for you just to give us a little bit of a deeper understanding of what that looks like for you.
Yeah, for me, it's like I always tell people, like, for me, I'm not a DEI consultant, but I believe like as a manager or just as a professional, I think it's important to, I call myself values driven, and I try to indeed showcase inclusive leadership, indeed try to generate a sense of belonging for all people as much as possible. And I think it's really important that it should be part of everyone's work. So it should not be something that is like delegated to the D&I lead, if there is a D&I lead, because that's also not always the case. But I think everyone should be, basically doing DEI as part of your work. If you're a leader, when you're a manager, when you're a project lead, when you're a director, you're working with people essentially. So I'm like, it should be part of your work. And if it's not, then you also need to question yourself, like if you really are that good of a leader, because like treating people right, I would say that's the bare minimum, that's the basics, like the core actually what you should be doing. So yeah, that's how I view DEI, and how it works for me, like in my day-to-day life. I would say like, okay, I indeed was born and raised in Amsterdam. I think the interesting thing is when you grow up in Europe, what you often see is that like Europe tries to separate itself almost from its own history. So of course we hear a lot about America, all the stuff that goes down there, but I'm also like, okay, it did not happen in a vacuum. Of course, it originated in Europe. And that's always interesting in discussions then, that it's a lot of talk like, okay, as if it's something that's beyond Europe, but it's like, no, it's very much connected. And the only thing that you see is that it might be different. Just from looking, like observing America from afar, you might see that there are more extremes there, but here it might be less extreme. It's also the violence, maybe that element is less. But at the same time, when I look at the thinking about these concepts, the anti-racism, that's also more developed in America. So you have more extremes, maybe, but the thinking is also more evolved. So those are like some of the first things that come to mind for me.
Yeah, no, I love that, Maikel. We're definitely aligned around the work of DEI being something that every single one of us should own, should hold
Yeah,
ourselves accountable for. Angela Shaw placed into the chat that DEI is a team sport. Everyone has a position to play. And
definitely.
I love that. And so I want to officially give you the title of intentional inclusionist, because that is a part of your journey and your leadership. Many in this audience know that I'm the author of two books. My first one is entitled The Intentional Inclusionist, and that is the premise of it, is that
Yeah,
each of us have a sphere of influence where we can create this change, right, to help
yeah,
ensure a greater level of inclusivity and belonging. And it doesn't require a title, because it's not about
absolutely.
positionality. It's simply just about embracing the ability and the need for everyone to feel that sense of humanity, right? And so I
Absolutely.
appreciate you saying it's not just for those who are, in certain positions entitled. This work belongs to all of us. And so thank you for
Yeah,
amplifying that. So you were born and raised in Amsterdam. I
yeah,
want to know, what was that experience like for you? And then I
yeah.
also want to, try to draw some parallels, as best as you can to DEI as it relates in Amsterdam to here and the States. What can
Yeah.
you share with us?
So yeah, it's a very interesting experience for me to be like living here, because like most of my family also lives here in the Netherlands, but at the same time, like the history of the Netherlands Suriname is it's complex, let's say it like that, because of course, like I said, like yeah, my family really is from Suriname, but they were enslaved in Suriname by the Dutch. So essentially, what you can say is that I'm born and raised and was living right at the center of where the colonizers came from. So that's a strange dynamic. But at the same time, you have like, and I think like that also will apply to many other people in Caribbean nations, but I think also in America that you have like a dual feeling, because at the one hand, it's like there are a lot of things that I dislike also about the history, but at the same time, I'm also very Dutch because like I was born and raised here, so it's like totally a
Yeah.
part of me. So you have always like that almost that internal battle going on between the things that, yeah, on the one hand you totally don't feel yeah, like you belong here, but at the same time, yeah, you do belong here because this is all that you know. So yeah, those are some of the difficult aspects of growing up here. And I think that what I alluded to before is like when it comes to topics such as anti-racism, DEI, when I look at America, I see the thinking is way more developed. Um, and that's also the difficult thing here, because like people don't acknowledge the fact that racism is here, but they also don't acknowledge the brutal history that the Netherlands has. And those two things are very much related. So yeah, there are a lot of complex factors here. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done, steps to be taken, but like if you don't acknowledge it, then yeah, nothing is going to happen. And I'm like, when you look at countries, for instance, like South Africa also has a brutal history, but one thing that they did do is they acknowledge they have truth and reconciliation. And you can say about it what you want, but if there's no truth, if you don't even want to say what happened, then okay, how can you really move forward in any constructive or meaningful manner? And I think that's a big thing that I see in the Netherlands and also other European countries, that yeah, the acknowledgement of the brutal history that is very much lacking, and as a result, acknowledging all the things that basically stem from that, all the inequities, all the racism, all the microaggressions, are actually very macro, are also not really addressed. So yeah, there's yeah, a lot that needs to be done.
No, I so appreciate, Maikel, you amplifying the necessity of acknowledging the historical context,
Yeah,
because if we aren't willing to acknowledge that and use that information to help inform how we can change, then I believe that we are going to find ourselves in this vicious cycle, right? Where we just continue to keep doing things over and over again, expecting a different
exactly.
result, and it's not going to happen. So
Yeah,
I know that sometimes it's triggering and it's painful to bring the historical context to these conversations, but it's so critical. It's so critical. So thank you for sharing that. So when I was reading your bio, I certainly amplified that you have a Pan-African mindset. And
yeah,
so let's dig into that. What does that mean?
yeah,
And then opening the souls of Black folks. That was also part of some of the speak in your bio. So
yeah, yeah,
unpack those two for us, please.
yeah. Yeah, for me, I think that Pan-African element is very important. So, for instance, when I look uh, at Black people all over the world, I'm looking at it like, okay, We have like deep connections actually with each other. Again, I need to go back to history, like, okay, history was very much also aimed at dividing us and also making us believe or that we, like the one might be better than the other, or that we are different from each other, that we should not unite. But actually there's so many things that bind us. So when I look at, like, first when I look at African Americans, when I look at African American English, for instance, the way that that is structured, you see relations, you see like patterns that reflect Creole languages from Creole language and also West African languages. So I see like commonalities there, but also just in the way that we speak, the way that we talk, the way that we tell the stories. You actually see that even though, okay, we've been scattered, but you see that there's like a common African imprint there. And I can recognize that. So I can look at you, I can look at other African Americans. I'm like, yeah, I see a lot of things that we do the same, and also like the things that we even don't say. For instance, I was in a call with a lot of people, and there was an African American dude there, and we were on the same frequency. So also non-verbally. So I could see by the things that he was not saying, I was like, I'm exactly not saying the same things that you're not saying. And afterwards we connected and we're like, yeah, we think the exactly the same things. And that's also things that you notice that, okay, we're still very deep connections between all of us. And I think that's important. And I think another element that for me is important is like when I say Pan-African mindset, also like, okay, how we as Black people, how we look at each other. So for instance, like Malcolm X is for me a very important person. I would say like outside my family is the person that most influenced me, but he said a lot of meaningful things. And I think a lot of people think that he is about hate. Some people say that, but actually Malcolm X was all about love. All that he did was out of love for his people, but actually also out of love for other people. Because like when he challenged white people, it's more like, okay, it's out of love. It's like, okay, if you acknowledge certain things, if you try to do better in those elements, then you can also like really embrace your own full humanity. And also you need to see him within the time, because I'm like, okay, he might have said certain extreme things, but so people all thought like recognize it, like, okay, you're living here quite safe, but the time that he lived in, the way Black people are treated there, I'm like, okay, you might be pretending that you don't see, but I'm not that person. I'm never going to be the one. I was still like it is. So I know exactly the circumstances that he lived in. So he's important. And I think one important thing that he said is, okay, we need to change our own mind. So for instance, the way that we look at each other, the way that they look at you, or the way that they look at Courtney, he says, okay, we need to change our own mind. We need to look at each other's brothers and sisters so we can come together with warmth and unity. And I think that's an important thing, that we look at each other like that. So that's what I also mean with Pan-African mindset. I think the way that we look at each other is important. And also that even though we are scattered, like I am here, but I am very much aware of where I came from, that African background. And that ties me with you wherever you are. So whether you are in Africa or whether you are in America, we are very much connected, and I know that. And that's actually a very important element for me. So yeah, that is one of the things that are very important for me there.
No, thank you. Thank you for that, for bringing that clarity and for introducing Maikel Metz to this conversation. It's very appropriate given that we are in Black History Month, Black Heritage Month, also, as I like to refer to it. But you're so right. We do need to acknowledge all of that. And I think it's important. Sometimes we can judge how in which people will show forth their activism, right? But we have to make sure that we are considering the context of the time and how in which people did these things. I mean, today activism can look vastly different from what it looked like before. And so I think that sometimes we're quick to stand in judgment about maybe that approach was right, wrong, instead of just seeing it as, was it appropriate for that time though? So I appreciate you bringing that also to the conversation, Maikel.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
So let's talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging in the Netherlands. How does that show forth in the Netherlands, and what are some ways in which you could help communicate to this broader audience, maybe some of the key differences that you see?
Yeah. To be brutally honest, I'm not very impressed with the in the Netherlands. Like I said, like
so there's no best practices and lessons learned that you can help us out with, huh?
No, well, they're way behind. Let's be honest. Like the Netherlands is stuck at the diversity, superficial diversity at best.
Yeah.
So those other letters, you can forget about it. They're not really working on that yet. So yeah, I can give you best practices from myself, from the own personal how I view things. But the Netherlands as a whole has a long way to go here, and it really has to do with like, okay, do you want to address certain things or not. And for instance, like the author Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie from Nigeria, she said it quite accurately not too long ago. She gave a speech in Berlin, and she talks about that whole not acknowledging like what's really up in the past and right now. She said like, okay, it's not that Europe tries to deny or its colonial history, but yeah, Europe has developed a way to tell the history in such a way that essentially seeks to erase the history. What she says is like, okay, the truth is, yes, a story is only true if you tell the complete story. If you only tell part of the story, you're essentially telling a lie. And I think that's something that is very much the state that we are in here. It's like, okay, we are not really telling the whole story. But if you're not telling the whole story, then you're not really addressing the real thing, and you're just doing some superficial stuff. And that's the something that we need to get through here, because otherwise you're just like, yeah, saying some hollow phrases, or you're coming with some hollow actions without any meaningful thing to it. So yeah, that's and it's not nice to have to say that, but like another example that I can give is because like I also tell people like the workplace is very much related to what happens outside. So for instance, like we know that the police that they have certain biases. That's a fact. It has been researched. But oftentimes, like, okay, when they do stuff, like you would say, like, okay, they would lie about it, or they would say, no, we don't do that. But what happened in the Netherlands, like last year in September, the district court in the Netherlands ruled that not only does the border police like use race or ethnicity in their risk assessments, they said it was okay. They said like, okay, it's okay as long as it's not the only factor. But I'm like, yeah, of course it's never the only factor. It's not only just because someone is black, you can say, okay, it's a black man or it's a black woman. But that's the state here, that they're like, okay, that's okay. But when you look at the Constitution, the Dutch Constitution, like Article 1 of the Constitution, that actually forbids discrimination. So that ruling from the court, that actually goes against the own Constitution. So the people that made the claims, they appealed that. So that appeal is still going on. But a few weeks later, what the border police then said is like, okay, we're going to stop with ethnic profiling because there's no longer support in society for it. But such a statement also doesn't really mean anything, because that's like saying like, okay, I'm going to stop with lynching because there's no longer support for it. It's not because I believe that it's morally not the right thing, but it's just like, okay, there's no support for it. So that's kind of the state that I'm facing in the Netherlands. And it's like when I tell people, it's always they are surprised and shocked when they hear these stories, because like the Netherlands always, it presents an image as liberal and progressive, but these kinds of things, they're quite brutal. Like if the judge even says like, okay, I'm going to allow ethnic profiling, then yeah, we have a lot of things that we need to fix here.
Yeah, that's so painful to hear. I mean, I think that we become so accustomed to what we know, those of us who born and raised in the States. And so when we hear information of ethnic profiling happening in other countries, it is, yeah, it's painful to hear. It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, really, really painful to hear.
And I think it's indeed painful. And also, like, even I was surprised because of course, I knew that was going on, but I was like, I was thinking a judge would never allow that. But then it happened, and I was like shocked. And even when I heard that, I was like, okay, it cannot be true. But then I read the full transcript, and I was like, it literally says that they can use ethnicity as an objective identifier to determine whether someone is Dutch and or belongs in the Netherlands. And yeah, that's the difficult thing. Like when you have discussions, it's like, okay, sometimes people all of a sudden approach you, want to talk about D&I, and I'm like, I've been black my whole life. Now, it's interesting that you want to talk now since what happened in the US 2 years ago. But how can you talk about DI in the workplace while not addressing what goes on outside? Because when I go to a different country and come back, I might be subjected to the same thing. So yeah, that's some of the things that I see here. That's yeah.
Yeah. So you use the words that you feel like in the Netherlands, it's this notion of being stuck at diversity, not really trying to be intentional around all of the other critical components of this broad body of work. And I think that's something that shows forth in so many different ways across different geographies, including in the United States. There's a lot of organizations that I feel like are stuck right at diversity. And they may wear that as a badge of pride and honor. We value diversity, but the bottom line is that diversity is already here and happening. There's nothing that we need to do to show forth diversity. That's vastly different from representation and incredibly different from equity and inclusion. And so, being stuck at diversity, I think there's something to be said for amplifying that is not the way. That's not what we should be aspiring for. So anyway, I know I'm preaching to the choir here. But let's move into data science and artificial intelligence. So first and foremost, data science. I don't know about you all, but I'm not going to pretend that I know a whole lot about what all that entails. So why don't you educate us? Just give us kind of a breakdown of, what is data science and what is artificial intelligence, and what does it mean as it relates to ethics from a trust perspective, when we continue to find so many ways to leverage technology these days.
Yeah. Of course, yeah. So this need the role that I'm currently in, and like what I can say about data science is, in a nutshell, you could say that we utilize data to, for instance, try to arrive at new insights or try to improve the services that people have. So it can be maybe the recommendations that you get, it can be recommendations in all different areas, like the clothes that you might want to buy or the videos that you're interested in. That's one example. Maybe also financial products that you would like to use. So it can be a lot of different areas. And that's basically what we do. Like, and nowadays, of course, there's a whole lot of data being generated, being collected more and more. And I think that's also like one of the reasons why this is exploding more, because like, okay, this field does require data. So if there's more data available, then you're also able to do more with it. And I think the AI element, what's interesting there is like, the term artificial intelligence, it kind of suggests like real intelligence, but the reality is that the systems are not actually intelligent. So they just look at patterns, and they can look at the patterns that they've seen from historical data, for instance, but it's not really that they understand that. And I think that's also an important distinction to make there. Like, okay, it's you can do a lot of fantastic things with it, but the systems themselves, they are not actually intelligent. So the real intelligence also needs to come from humans. And we can talk about that later on, like, okay, how that's important, what that means. But yeah, I think that's an important thing to mention there. And what I can also say about data science, like the term science, it kind of suggests like a true scientific process, but what you do see in practice is there are a lot of people that are active in the field with different backgrounds, and different backgrounds that is good in a sense, because you need that diversity and also diverse perspectives in there. But at the same time, like for instance, when you compare this to other like more established professions, they have like, okay, certain set standards and guidelines that you need to adhere to. What with data science, that isn't necessarily the case. So is one thing that I've developed within our team is what we call a data science and AI standard. And what that basically does is it helps you to ensure that your project or your data science as a whole is conducted in a responsible and also in a structured manner. So it can help you with, for instance, an example that you can give is like looking at the input data, that you check the input data, that you just look at, okay, all the different groups represented in the data. But that you also, for instance, look at the outputs of the system that you've built to see, like, okay, does it actually work well for all the different groups, not just for the totality, for the whole, but also when you look at different subgroups, do you also then see that it works well? And when you look at all those things, if it's also when you document that, that can also tell you then, okay, does this thing work well or not? And it can very well be that in certain situations that it is not that good of a model, but then you can say, okay, I might not. It's better not to use it in those situations, but only use it in situations where we can actually see that it has good results. But you can only do that if it's documented and transparent. And if it's not, they might get a situation that everyone starts using a product, and then later on you find out that it actually does not work well. So yeah, that's I think one of the benefits that can come from using such a standard. So yeah, that's just to give you a little bit of an idea of some of the things that I'm involved in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it was interesting. I was reading an article the other day in preparation for this conversation. It was talking about some of the drawbacks to artificial intelligence, but certainly it also acknowledged some of the value of it. And it alluded to the fact that AI could stand for artificial intelligence, or in some regards, artificial ignorance, right? If we aren't careful to make sure that we are developing and being responsible, to your point, with how in which we're leveraging that data. So talk a little bit more about some examples examples of how in which you see bias can show up in AI.
Yeah. I think like one way that you can show up, for instance, when you look at when people, for instance, want to apply for a loan, it could very well be that, for instance, that men then have a higher likelihood of getting a loan approved, or people from a certain ethnic background will have a higher likelihood of getting the loan approved. Another example could be, for instance, in the recruiting process. That was a big example from a few years ago. So a big company. What they did is that they thought that they had taken out like elements such as gender and race, but the reality is that there are also like characteristics that can be related to gender and race. So even if you don't know the gender or race, based on the other characteristics, you can still know like, okay, is it a white person or a black person, or is it a man or a woman? So that's what happened there. So they thought that, okay, I've taken all those other elements out, but it turned out actually to discriminate. So in that case, for instance, that women had a way higher likelihood of getting a job, but that was based on the historical data that it was trained on. And I think what's also important to mention there is that you get the bias in there, and sometimes people think that, okay, nowadays there's so much data available being generated that if you have a lot of data, you will be okay, but you still need to check like, okay, is the data balanced? Are there maybe relationships between characteristics that might still give you secret information that actually will tell the model whether it's a woman or whether it's a person with a certain ethnic or racial background? So those are a few examples. And I think what's also interesting to mention is that, of course, like, yeah, I'm in data science and AI. So I can talk about bias there, but you actually see bias also in other technologies. And I think one really relevant example is now was during the pandemic that, of course, like when people like get COVID, when they get into the hospital, they might need extra oxygen. But one thing that you have there is like there are like devices used, oximeters or oxygen meters. What research actually shows is that they don't work that well for people with dark skin. So what it actually does is like it overestimates the oxygen level in the blood of those people. As a result, they only in a later stage then get extra oxygen, or only in a later stage will be put on a ventilator. And the thing is that there was an article about the situation in the UK. It was now being investigated because, like, if that's the case with those systems, that could also then lead to higher death rates with people with darker skin. And the problem there was also that it was not only that there is that bias in the technology, but the research was already done before the pandemic. So the question then also is, okay, if the research is done, like, okay, why didn't anyone do anything with that data? Because I think that's an important thing here, the distinction to always make. Like a few months ago, I gave also a presentation about this topic, and someone asked me like, okay, can't there just be, for instance, a checklist made that you can follow? And I say like, okay, we can do that. Like I've made also the standard, the data science and AI standard, that's also essentially a checklist. But what you need to realize is that you're still dependent on people. People need to follow the checklist. The AI won't supervise itself. So if people are not ethical and don't want to follow the rules, or try to obfuscate reality for whatever reason, or pretend that they're following the rules, then you will still have that issue. And that's the issue that you had here. Like the research was done, the medical devices don't work that properly, then nothing was done with it. And then the pandemic hit. Now, you might not have seen the pandemic coming, so that only amplified the problem, but we already knew that the devices had certain issues.
Yeah. So it shows up in a multitude of different types of technologies. And you know, so I'm curious about how much of this correlates to just the lack of diversity in STEM fields in general. Because when I consider that even if we were to have a checklist that we can, you know, have everybody to follow pretty routinely, it's that checklist, what makes its way to that checklist is informed by the research and the data. And oftentimes it takes great level of representation across many different populations for people to be able to uncover what those potential challenges can be for certain groups. And so what is the correlation from your vantage point to just maybe the general lack of diversity in STEM?
Yeah, I think like if the people that are, of course, developing it, if they are all from the same group, then it's already less likely maybe that they would flag certain issues, or that it would even be maybe a consideration for them that, okay, maybe the tool that I'm developing to determine like, okay, the healthcare that someone would get, maybe there could be a bias there for certain people. But if you're all in the same group, you might not even think about that. So I think that's just one area where it pops up. Like if everyone is basically like from the same background, then there is a higher likelihood that you will miss certain elements. But even if they are like from diverse backgrounds, it's still important that they indeed also like have that critical mindset and also that they have that empathy to actually care about other people.
Right.
And that is, I think, also an important thing to like really mention, that it's not just about having, again, not just having diverse people. You also need to have like a real like progressive mindset to be able to say like, okay, I really want to address these issues. But I think it isn't definitely a problem. Like if the people with the developing the technology all have the same background, or for instance, when the people have like, because not just the people that, I think that's also important to say, like, it's not just the people, the technical people that are developing it, but also like really the business leaders on top. Because for instance, like when you talk about all those social media platforms, for instance, there was also a lot of talk about, okay, how the algorithms, how they basically, if it's also manipulate people or how they tolerate certain very extreme viewpoints. But the point that I always make there is that it's not necessarily only that technical people like deliberately make like bad algorithms. It's also like the people at the top, they know like, okay, engagement basically means more profits. So they basically have a business model that's really set up to encourage that and to basically keep it going. So if you really want to tackle this, it's also important that the leaders are really also like people with an ethical mindset, that are not only there thinking like, okay, I need to make like the most profit, but also really think like, okay, might my system maybe be hurting some people, even though it might be a smaller group, like, but yeah, do you care enough about that then to want to tackle that?
Right. Do you care enough? Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of people that are joined here today, including myself, were taken aback by just the information regarding the amount of oxygen in Black skin and how AI overestimates that. I mean, this is life and death in some regards, in many situations. And so it certainly is jarring. So one of the questions that's coming from the audience, and I appreciate the questions that are coming forth, I will open it up momentarily to invite as many of you that desire to present your questions directly or even just contribute to the conversation to do so. But one question that's come forward is, can you offer any recommendations, Maikel, or insight into how we can incorporate more DEI, lessen the bias into artificial intelligence or other technologies more responsibly? What can we do?
Yeah. So like one thing that you can do is like the standard that I talked about, like, okay, if you follow such a way of working, and it's also really has a lot to do with like, okay, just logical thinking, because it's one of the key elements in there is like you need to be transparent about the steps that you take and also document it. So things like if you then take certain data, then you need to be transparent about, okay, what is the composition of the data, and then also document it so other people can also look at it and then also make their own determinations based on that. So that's one thing that you can do, like follow such a methodical process. And I think it's also very important to have like, it's like in my work at UI, we also use what we call certain so-called trusted AI methodology. And it also like mentions a lot of the aspects that to consider. So for instance, even though data science and AI, it's about technology, but that framework then also mentions other elements. So for instance, like the ethical factors to consider, but also factors having to do with the social impact. For instance, like, okay, if you implement that technology, like how will it impact people? Will it that maybe lead to people being displaced in the sense that they might lose their job or maybe need to do other work? You also need to really think about the accountability part. So like, it cannot just be that the algorithm decides something and that then if you want to complain about it, then there's no human or whatever behind it where you can go to. It's also like, okay, no matter what the algorithm does, there also needs to be a person or organization behind that. So like utilizing those kinds of frameworks can really help you to also say like, okay, it's not just about the technical side, but also really consider those elements, ethical elements, social impact, accountability. Another thing that you can also really have is like an oversight board, for instance, preferably an external oversight board with professionals from like a variety of different fields. So not just technical people, so take people with a background in history and psychology, for instance, sociology, in ethics and in law. When you have that, you will get like different viewpoints that you might not consider when you're just like basically stuck in your own tunnel, developing your products, but having that external check upon the stuff that you do can really also be helpful. So I think that can really help. And I think the main thing is just you need to be open and critical and also realize that you don't know everything, and it's really good to also get other people involved to just check your work and also make it better. So yeah, there are definitely things that you can do, and like I said, it isn't even like rocket science. It's more like, okay, you need to take the steps, and you also really need to care about it, because I think the care element is very important. Like, okay, do you believe it's a problem or not, and do you care enough to want to do something about it? And but there's also, again, the challenge, because like I said, like ethical AI, it does require ethical humans. So I would say, like, okay, there's a lot of talk nowadays also about bias in AI, and in a way it's kind of deflection, because it deflects away from the human responsibility there. And I'm like, okay, if we really want to solve or fix a problem of ethical AI, we need to solve the problem of ethical humans, because there are a lot of problems that we have not really solved yet. But that's where we need to begin, because the technology, like I said, AI, it suggests intelligence, but it's not really intelligent. So even if there's a bias in the system, it's not that it really understands the bias or that it chooses to discriminate against certain groups, but the people that are monitoring the systems, they can know that. So they need to be the ones to check that and supervise that. And that is something that you can put in place, those structures, but they really need to do that. And also technical solutions. For instance, I also work with certain technological or software solutions. For instance, like I mentioned the example of loan applications, that it might be biased against women or people with a certain background, but you can also check for those things. So what you then can do is like, okay, maybe I've made an AI model, and I put it through that system, and it determines like, okay, women are really being negatively impacted in the model. What you can then say is, okay, I'm going to retrain the model and say, like, I don't want to have a big difference between men and women, or you can say, I don't want any difference at all. And you can retrain until you arrive at a model that actually has a high accuracy and at the same time does not have this imbalance between men and women. So those are things that you can actually do. So there are certainly steps that you can take.
Yeah, Maikel, you've given us some very practical considerations. And it's like you said, it's not necessarily, it doesn't have to be rocket science. One of the most powerful statements that you've brought to the conversation today is that ethical AI requires ethical people, period.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, that in and of itself will solve so much of this. And so that really resonated with me. I want to bring Vicky Gonzalez, one of our client partners and friends of the Intentional Conversations VodCast, to the conversation, because she shared in the chat an example of equity in data. And I would love for you to just speak to that, Vicky. Hi, how are you?
Hi, good. Good to see you. Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maikel. This is very, very important stuff. And my question is definitely in this family. It involves data. So I'm thinking of equity in data, and the example I'm using is an engagement survey. And obviously the data that you get is to specific questions, but it also relates to the respondent's identity, age, race, ethnicity, tenure, sexual identity, et cetera, et cetera. So what is the best practice for equitably and ethically evaluating that data? You know, top line by the various categories, it seems ethical and proper. Does it seem ethical or proper to just look at the cum data, or is it more equitable and proper to weight it by its components? You know, some people might favor majority rules, but if you're really looking for it, what is the more ethical way to approach it and evaluate it?
Yeah. So I think the question that you're asking is like, okay, at what level basically should you be looking at, okay, to determine like whether something is fair or not? And I think that's an important question, because when it relates to AI, when I talk about that, you can, for instance, test like, okay, whether a model, for instance, is fair or not. Also, there are levels. So like you can have like group level fairness, and that basically means like, okay, for a group as a whole, for instance, like black and white people or men and women, for the group as a whole, I can say like, okay, it is fair or not. That's one good metric, but at the same time, there's also something less individual fairness, because also within those big groups, there are also differences. So also, and that for instance has to do with the fact like, okay, also for instance, for individual decision, you need to be able to tell like, okay, how did the system arrive at the decision, so that you can also be sure for your individual case that it arrived at the good thing. So I would say like you need to consider like all those levels. Like the group level is really important. Of course, I need to know, for instance, as a black man, I need to know like, okay, is the system fair for black people? That's an important thing. But on the individual level, I also need to know, okay, if I apply for a loan and it is denied, can you also explain like why in my individual situation you arrived at that decision? So I think all those levels are important, and I think it's also important that to raise this issue, because like sometimes like also in this AI field, like it might be presented like, okay, well, we've checked everything, it's fair, but you might only have looked at one level. But that doesn't mean that on the other levels actually that you are fair. So yeah, I would say you need to really go into it and also really address all those different levels. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much, Vicky. Appreciate the question. So we have, Maikel, lots of engagement happening in the chat, and I want to try to, with the time we have left, to get to as many of these questions as possible. And Andrea Dunn, I'm going to give just a brief moment in case you would like to unmute yourself and share your question directly. If not, I'm happy to present it for you.
Hi, I just have a quick question. I'm an asthmatic. I've been one since I was 3, and my son is also an asthmatic. And when we have asthmatic attacks or difficulty breathing, and they put the little monitor on our fingers, and it always reads 100%. And I'm struggling for air. Is there something that I can say to them to let them know that this is not reading correctly? We're both Black, by the way.
Yeah.
It happens all the time.
Yeah.
And by the time we get help, we're in critical state.
Yeah. So that's I'm very sorry to hear that you've experienced that. But this is exactly the example that I meant. Those oxygen meters that they clip on the fingers, and they totally overestimate the oxygen level. So what you could do, like maybe later on we can also share research about it, like the research that has been done. So if it's now in the UK, they're doing a review of medical devices, including these ones, but also that's together with the counterparts in the US, because the research actually shows that these devices do not work for people with darker skin. And it's not fantasy, it's like it's research that has been done. That's like, so that's something that you could use to them to say like, okay, the research shows that there's clearly something going on here. Like you might believe me, okay, here's the data, here's the research that has been done. The UK is reviewing it, the US is also reviewing it. So that is something that you could definitely use, because it is known that these devices don't work. And I think that's also, again, like the whole ethical side here is that I can tell people all I want, that like, okay, all the checklists that you need to follow. But again, here it's like, okay, ethical, like people need to show ethical behavior, because people know about this, but they clearly don't care enough about Black people to actually do something about it. So yeah, I hope that answers your question a bit, like that you could use that research, and yeah.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that was painful to hear. It really was. But thank you so much for your question, Andrea. So I want to go to Linroy Jones now. He has a question that he placed into chat. I want to give you a chance to present your question live. Linroy?
Thank you. And thank you for being here today. This is just a rich conversation. It's such an out-of-the-box conversation that has that D&I twist to it. I got 2 questions in there, but I'm just going to go with one. Can you fast forward for us and then kind of put your futurist hat on? What does AI look in 10 years? And it doesn't have to be directly related to DE&I, but just otherwise, how does it look, AI look in 2032? I'm reading a lot of companies' strategic plans, and it's all tied together. Emotional intelligence is also in there too, but I'm interested in your futurist hat. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for the question, Leroy. Also good to see you, because I've also seen you a couple of times in other conversations. So glad that you're here.
Yes, thank you.
So when I look at the future, I think what's important with AI, what you already see actually is that AI, it's infused in many different things, and that will continue also in the future. So for instance, when you look at what is AI, how it can manifest in computer vision, like computers are able to like recognize images or videos. It can also manifest in speech recognition. But it can also be integrated into other things. So when you think about robots and self-driving cars, AI is integrated in there. When you look at the software that we also use on our telephones, like there's a lot of AI also there. So how I look at AI is that people might think about it as, like I said, like artificial, like maybe like robots. They might think of Terminators or those kinds of things. But actually, AI manifests in many fluid ways. So it will be integrated in everything. And like even like the technology that we're using right now, Zoom also uses AI technology, for instance, to enhance the image quality, or like artificially enhance like the lighting that we see. So the way I see it going is that will only continue because it's actually already happening. Like AI is in many, many different places right now, and that will only continue. And the other thing that I might say, like, okay, maybe those ethical aspects, like, okay, will that be tackled? Like, for instance, in Europe, they have like on the European level, they have developed like ethical guidelines for AI. So on the one hand, that is positive, you could say, but then again, I always come back with my history. I'm like, it's nice that Europe tries to position itself as the ethical ones, but like you won't fool me, like I'm more historian than data scientist. I know that the behavior of Europe generally is not that ethical. So that doesn't necessarily mean that much to me. But I think that definitely like if people like with different backgrounds, they raise their voices more about these things, like those things will need to be tackled because like the oxygen meters, that's one of the examples that I hate most personally also, because the consequences are so dire right there. Like that stuff cannot continue. So it's important then that we try to mobilize as much as we can to also tackle that stuff because like that's really lethal stuff. And but yeah, I think but we still have that challenge because like I say, like AI is like one iteration of the technologies, but also a lot of other technologies, and we keep having the same things over and over again. So I can talk about AI now, but I can also go back in time and there's other technology and we have the same discussion. And again, it's then people are the problem because like people choose to ignore certain elements. So it might just not necessarily be like the most hopeful fish in all elements, but I'm always realistic in how I view things. And yeah, when you just look at history, that's we can almost know how what we can expect almost from certain things.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Great. Thank you, Lenroy. So much is happening in the chat. It's hard to keep up. Karen Fleshman, thanks for being here, Karen. It's good to have you here. Her question is, who are some leaders in ethical AI that you follow, Maikel, and would suggest perhaps this audience follow? Yeah.
So we have Joy Polowimi, who's now actually Dr. Joy. She got her PhD, I believe, last month. And she's also quite well known also in the States because she has done a lot of work when it comes to facial recognition and the bias in there. That means like the systems were not able to recognize her dark features. So I follow her. And what's also interesting there, maybe a sidestep, like you see that in a lot of things, also with the sensors, for instance. So for instance, I am an early bird. I like to start my day early, but then I go to the office, the EY office in Amsterdam, and they have a sensor there. And that sensor often did not pick me up. So that's how your day then starts, with the microaggression that you get from the technology. So then I need to back it up, need to look at the sensor, maybe you can see the whites in my eyes, so that it might pick me up, and then the revolving door starts going. But that's also an element where you see like how bias gets in there. But so Joy, she really tackles those kinds of things. So that's someone I look up to. Also because she's also interested in language, which I also like. So that's the dual focus that she has that resonates with me. So yeah.
Great. And this is a question that came forth earlier today when we were talking about the Netherlands and kind of the difference between there and the States. And this question relates to how do people in the Netherlands react to what they see in the media that maybe or big issues that are occurring in the United States, like the murder of George Floyd. Are these events televised there? What are you hearing and seeing?
Yeah, they are televised, so we do see it. But we do see like, because like we have like all the big news centers also here. But when I go back, because actually before this broadcast also talked about the George Floyd situation, like how that actually played out in the media. So one thing that really bothered me was, because we have CNN, that of course it's an American news center. So we got that here. And they were talking about implicit bias in relation to George Floyd. This was like a week after it happened. I was like, yeah, this is totally not implicit bias. This is totally like, it's so blatantly obvious what's going on that there's like explicit racism, nothing implicit or unconscious about it. But that's what we get here then. And that's how it's then presented. And I think that is also like when he was murdered, it was because my birthday was actually a few days after that. So I was here with my family, my mother and my sisters, and my mother's already over 80. So she's been around, she's seen a lot of things. But then the news people said like, okay, George Floyd was killed. So my old mother, she interrupted it. She gave commentary to the news like, okay, he was murdered, because she knows what's going on. But that's what we get then here. And if people only hear the one thing, they might think, okay, nothing wrong, he was killed. But we know that he was murdered. So yeah, we get everything, but just the way that it is presented sometimes might obfuscate the reality again of what really went down, but we do get it.
Yeah. This has been such a rich conversation. I feel like we could go for another hour, Maikel, but we are, quickly reaching the top of the hour. And I can't thank you enough for coming and sharing with us. I think that you've really opened our eyes, and there definitely needs to be more conversations around this, because I only see artificial intelligence and technologies continuing to be a way of life, or how in which we get things done. And so we need to make sure we're continuing to amplify this conversation. So thank you so much. I want to give you the final 30 to 60 seconds to close us out with any parting remarks. What did I not ask you about today that you're feeling a lot of energy around that you want to share with this audience?
I think you asked me a lot of solid questions. Indeed, we could have gone out for 2 more hours. A lot that we can discuss. No, I think we addressed a lot of important things, and like I said, I'm active in the technology field, so I'm definitely, I see the potential of the technology, like a lot of cool stuff that we can do with it. There's a project that it was in Child Protective Services, helping the people that, for instance, make their planning to determine, like, okay, how many resources do they need to be able to help all the people in difficult situations. So that's actually, it's a nice example of stuff that you can do. So there's definitely very good potential also in those kinds of areas, but you just need to be mindful of the fact that AI is just basically a reflection, a mirror image of society and of human behavior. And we don't have to act surprised when we see bias in AI, because I'm like, what did you expect? If you hold a mirror to your own face, you're going to see your own face. And that's what you get with AI. It just shows you. So don't be surprised when you see yourself reflected in it.
I know Africa was clapping her hands, and I have too as well, because that was so rich. Thank you so much, Maikel. I'm so grateful that you said yes to our invite and that you're a part of this community. And so we're really grateful for your time. I want to thank everyone for showing up today, for being a part of this conversation. If you found this to be useful and valuable, then certainly when you receive the replay, share it out with folks in your network, and we hope to see you back next week. Thanks so very much. Take great care.
Thank you, too.
Happy Friday.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.